So I just recently finished Tears of the Kingdom, and it was okay. It was so okay, in fact, that I felt the need to start writing down all the things that I liked about it because there were too many to keep track of. That's how this video came to be, and whether I decide to give it a decent title or name it the dumbest thing I can think of, just know that at the end of the day, I just want to talk about things that I noticed while playing the game and thought were pretty neat. Of course, my recommendation is to go in as blind as possible for your first playthrough, but if you're still willing to watch, then don't worry, I'm going to be really light with spoilers, covering things that you'll have encountered within the first few hours of gameplay, with barely any of it relating to the story. After all, this is mostly about game mechanics. Game mechanics! Game mechanics. I mean it with all seriousness when I say I think this game is groundbreaking. It captures a feeling of open-endedness that's unlike anything I've ever experienced before. And the two things that I think really contribute to that open-endedness, other than the sprawling open world of course, are your new tools and abilities and the puzzle design. Let's start with those new abilities. The first of these you get is Ultra Hand. It lets you pick up and move things around, and also lets you attach them to each other. Now going in, I thought to myself, well, Breath of the Wild let you move objects but only one's made of metal, so there's gotta be some sort of catch or limit here. So as it turns out, any object in the game that has physics you can move and attach to each other. That includes rocks, boxes, weapons, plants, food, monster parts, treasure chests, tumbleweeds. Hey look, I attached all these tumbleweeds together to make a mega tumbleweed. With Ultra Hand essentially being the fizz gun from Gary's mod, this is already the most control over the environment we've been given in the series. And that degree of control leads to a completely new way of interacting with the world. Something's too high up, you just grab it. Boulders in your way, just move it. But what's crazier is that everything you can move with Ultra Hand, you can also interact with using your other abilities. Fuse lets you graft things to your gear, and I'll talk more about it in depth later, but just know for now that almost everything you can pick up is also fusible. Ascend is a neat little movement ability that lets you rise through ceilings and platforms and out the other side. You can also ascend through any object with physics given it has the right kind of surface area. To be honest, I thought it would be more gimmicky than it actually is. Turns out you'll find yourself wanting to go up more than you want to go down. Recall rewinds an object's movement, and again, anything you could move you can rewind, meaning that all these objects in the world are getting ready to have their last 10 seconds of movement track, which is kinda nuts. All this is nuts. And again, these abilities greatly affect how you interact with the world. If you don't have an appropriate tool to mine ore with on you, you can just make one on the spot with Fuse. You can get out of caves quickly with Ascend, and Recall lets you correct your terrible mistakes. Things like wooden planks, you can move, recall, ascend through, and fuse. And the reason I'm pointing this out so much is because, to me, this seems like a far cry from the design philosophy of previous Zelda games, in which you'd get an item and then you'd have these points at which the item was meant to be used. You know, the grappling hooks for grapple points, the hammer is for stakes, the Dominion Rod is for statues with the little hole in them, the square goes in the square hole. Even Breath of the Wild had this sort of thing going on, but now, rather than each ability applying to a different element of the game, all your abilities apply to the same collection of objects in the world. And the result is a sense of freedom that is unique to this game. A world with so many possibilities and not as many limits as we're used to in games. And I'm not suggesting that limitations are necessarily a bad thing. They can help devs craft more controlled experiences, but it's undeniable how freeing Tears of the Kingdom feels in comparison. And the best part is that it all works without breaking. When you got all these devs coming out and questioning how the hell Nintendo pulled everything off here, that's how you know this game is something special. Going back to Ultra Hand, having the ability to move and weld things means you have the power to build. Even early in the game, I just experiment by making these little structures. I think there's just this little primal part of the brain that likes putting stuff together. And I can't talk about building things without mentioning Zonai devices. These are things like fans, wheels, rocket boosters, and other gadgets that you can attach to your contraptions, each with their own separate functionality. You get them in these little capsules, and oh my god, I can't believe they added gacha to Zelda. These can turn your wooden plank into a raft, or a cart, or a hot air balloon, or whatever the fuck this is. It's with these devices that the game really opens up, like an oyster. It's never a matter of if you'll be able to cross a gap or get someplace, it's always how you'll do it. You have all the tools necessary. You can make cars, bikes, planes even. Or you can let the little gremlin in your brain go wild. I welded 15 big wheels together to see what would happen, and it didn't exactly turn out as I hoped. I also tried to make the world's tallest unicycle. People are building fucking Metal Gears in this game. Ultra Hand and the Zonai devices both bring out a really pure kind of fun. Like I said, it's this basic human desire to build things and use your creativity. The same kind of joy you get from building with Legos. In fact, all of this reminds me of those Mindstorm sets with the motorized parts. The sky is pretty much the limit. And yes, there is a limit. It is a video game after all, but there's so many possibilities for what you can build that it's still fun building around those limitations. Not many games offer this kind of creativity creative freedom, and you're going to want to tap into your creativity when you're faced with solving this game's puzzles. Many of them require you to move things around or attach them or put together contraptions. A common thing the game will ask you to do is to transport something from point A to point B, leaving how you accomplish it completely up to you. Now, if this was any other game, I'm sure the idea of being asked to gather over a dozen logs would not sound like a very exciting side quest. In Tears of the Kingdom, the act of gathering over a dozen logs turns into a fun little challenge as you figure out the best way you can physically transport that many logs from one point to another. Those get thing from point A to point B objectives tend to yield the most interesting results, and to me, are where the game shines the most. This is also the core idea behind the new Korok Travelers, who need you to bring them to their distant friend through any means necessary. You could technically walk the Koroks all the way over if you so desired, but why would you when you could make them a neat little contraption? And it gets even better when you have the realization that these things feel no pain. And then, of course, like in Breath of the Wild, you have shrines. I think not only are the shrine puzzles more digestible, but they also make me feel smarter every time I solve them. I'm always looking forward to doing shrines in this game. I also like here that they have a cleaner look and they're more compartmentalized, compared to Breath of the Wild's shrines where I would walk in and feel a little overwhelmed sometimes. And combat shrines this time around are a bit more than just tests of strength, with them taking away all of your gear and having you build an arsenal from scratch. Again, I really want to stress here how different your approach to problem solving is compared to your typical Zelda game. I think there's a bit of a difference between looking around for points that you've trained your brain to associate with certain items and looking around your environment and scouring it for anything that you can use to build. You have to literally construct the solution from what you have in your pocket, in your surroundings, and in your brain. I like to compare it to coding, where you've got an end goal, but no real obvious path towards it. Sometimes you don't know if your solution is going to work, and sometimes it fails spectacularly, but when it works, it's nothing but satisfying. In a way that's similar to coding, there are multiple solutions to many of the game's puzzles, and that's thanks to the wealth of options you have in your toolkit. It's also partly because some of these puzzles revolve around things like wind, fire, ice, and electricity that can be generated in multiple ways through zonai devices or materials that you collect. There's such a huge emphasis on player choice that Nintendo themselves even came out and said, don't worry about playing the game the quote-unquote right way, because it's up to you how you want to approach obstacles. This is a self-aware game. It's okay with you outsmarting it and breaking it. All this reminds me of that one shrine in Breath of the Wild that everyone cheesed by flipping everything upside down. And that's kind of what I love about Tears of the Kingdom's design. It respects the player's decision. What I also love about shrines is that while they test you as a player, they also end up teaching you an awful lot about the game too, showing you different uses for zonai devices that maybe you hadn't considered, or some other game elements that you hadn't noticed before. You can later apply that knowledge that you gained out in the open world, which makes doing shrines all the more valuable. For example, I always used fans to propel things forward without even thinking that, yes, I could propel myself with them too. Shrines can show you what these devices are truly capable of, and that can make you reconsider what you already know. It's not just shrines that teach you about the game either though, as enemy encounters can also be moments of learning regarding the fusion system. And this is where I finally get to talk about the fusibility. So I'll be honest, at the start of the game, I was surprised I was fighting enemies with a bunch of sticks instead of proper weapons, and it turns out the reason for this is the game wanting you to make use of the new fusion system, which lets you graft items in your environment and your inventory to your weapon, your shield, and your arrows. Each item has an attack value that's applied to your gear when fused, so now there's a dual purpose for everything you collect. Of course, you could try going for raw attack power, but the fusion system is the most fun when you get a little creative. You can attach zonai devices to your weapons and shields. You can attach a weapon to another weapon and make a long weapon. And you can try all these ridiculous combinations. It's a little more than just sticking stuff to the end of your weapons though, because not only will the shape of the weapon change at times, but certain items will yield different effects as well. I like that with arrows now you only have to worry about one single stock of them, because now fire, ice, shock, and bomb effects can be applied through fusion, though applying them constantly is a little clunky. Going back to those enemy encounters I mentioned, you'll notice that enemies are fusing things to their weapons as well, and this actually gives you a chance to learn about the properties certain materials give through fusing them, or it gives you the chance to laugh at dumb fusions they come up with, like, haha, you put a tomato on a stick, you dumbass. The fusion system further encourages defeating monsters for their drops. The stronger the monster, the stronger the horn they drop, which you can then fuse for stronger weapons. Weapons also can have different properties, like extra durable, quick to charge, etc., that may influence your decision on what to fuse to them. The fusion system encourages experimentation. This game game is just a constant learning experience. The first few hours of this game, when everything is new to you, are just so goddamn magical for this reason. Just discovery after discovery, and so much, wow, I didn't know you could do that. Those first few hours are just so important. As someone who didn't mind how weapons were handled in Breath of the Wild, I find it neat that they doubled down on weapon durability and turned it into a more interesting system. All your weapons are expendable, and that's okay. A lot of their effectiveness comes from the fused materials, which you can hoard, so even if my Monster Horn sword breaks, I can rest easy knowing that I can make another 10 of them that are similarly as effective. This is a pretty minor story spoiler, but in Tears of the Kingdom, you find out that something caused all the weapons around Hyrule to decay, leaving them quite weak. And I kinda like how the durability and fusions are worked into the story this way. People are fusing things to their weapons to make them stronger. The way it's contextualized makes it easier to understand what the game wants you to do. The fusion system isn't a perfect system, but I can at least commend Nintendo for trying and taking things in a cool new direction. Also, now that I've covered all the abilities, just a neat little detail I want to share. So this game lets you swap abilities using this ability wheel, and I find how it's laid out to be pretty satisfying. Ultra Hand is on the right because it's your right hand, Recall is on the left because that's the direction typically used for backwards, Ascend is on top because you're going to be looking up while using it, and Fuse is on the bottom because you'll typically be looking down at the ground when fusing things. I don't know, I just find it cool, okay? I really don't agree with the notion that this game is just $70 Breath of the Wild DLC, or Breath of the Wild Plus. Not only did they change the world up a fair amount, I mean, I haven't even touched on the sky in this game, and how that's a whole nother tier of this kingdom to explore, haha, see what I did there? But as I've mentioned in this video, how you view and interact with the world is just so different between these two games. That's why I also disagree that it's difficult to go back to Breath of the Wild after playing Tears of the Kingdom, because I think they're different enough from each other to be considered their own unique experiences. I also don't think this game would have been the same without the foundation that Breath of the Wild provided, and that's why we shouldn't take this kind of game for granted, because if you think about it, it's a game that took 12 years to make. Tears of the Kingdom will likely go on to be as influential as Breath of the Wild was. I mean, if Breath of the Wild was part of the reason we got Elden Ring, imagine what this game is going to bring us. I would love to see more games that take this open-ended approach to puzzles and the world, but I just hope that people don't take the wrong kind of inspiration from this game and end up going, well, our game's gotta have a Gary's Mod Fizz Gun ability that lets you move all this stuff around and attach everything to each other, and the thing with these open world Zeldas is that their wow factor really comes through the most on your first playthrough. Something I noticed with this game even is that the more I explored, the more that initial sense of wonder would diminish, and I think that just comes with it being an open world game, I think. However, Tears of the Kingdom is a special case, where even after I'd finished the game and all the shrines and thought I was out of stuff to do, I realized I wasn't. Okay, first thing on the agenda, make the battle bus from Fortnite.
Jetzt zocke ich Fortnite und trink Cola. Yippee!
Give it cannons, and now it's a bus you can take into battle. And it's times like this you get the inspiration to make something deadly. Like this thing here, it's a little wonky, but it's effective, I guess. People are building fucking Metal Gears in this game. Okay, enough messing around, it's time for a little strategy I like to call strength in numbers. Look at him go. Yes, go my mechanical brethren, fight! Okay, this is working better than I expected. But what if I attached all these cannons to a single turret? Fuck, the enemy spotted me. Shit, come on, come on, come on. Oh, hold on, I got an idea. Hold on a sec now, hold on. Please work, please work. So in short, the game's good. I would highly recommend it, but I'd also recommend playing Breath of the Wild first and making sure that you have a lot of spare time to play this, because oh boy, you can play this game for dozens of hours and not even feel like you've made a dent in it. There's enemies to fight and puzzles that get you to rack your brain, but it's also a great game to chill out and relax to as well, whether you're exploring the world with your contraptions or just messing around with your new abilities. No, it's not a perfect game, but I think it's really neat that Zelda, after all these years, just keeps setting standards for what games can be and just pushes to innovate constantly, and I think out of all the things about this game that are pretty neat, that might just be the neatest of them all.